I'm excited to meet you and do this interview.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited for this too. So first, tell chat who you are and what you do.
Yeah, I'm Tim Bender. I'm the CEO of Hooded Horse, which is an indie publisher. I founded it a few years ago, and we released our first game in 2022.
That's awesome. So what was your first game?
So the first game we released was Old World, which is a sort of a 4X turn-based game by Soren Johnson, who was previously the lead designer for Civilization 4 and Civilization 3. So we released his game Old World under the indie company he founded, Mohawk Games, and that was mid 2022.
That's awesome. Yeah, look, I just took a look at it. It looks like you guys have 2,874 reviews at 81% positive on it. That's really good numbers, actually. That's quite awesome. Hell yeah.
Yeah. It's done well. It was it's a great game, and Soren is an amazing designer.
I like that. I really like that, actually. I think a lot of the times, one of the things that I'm seeing a lot of inside of the publishing space is publishers that just care about the metrics. But you saying that there about the developer is really, really awesome. I like that a lot. 100%.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, he's great. We're lucky to work with him. That's true of so many of ours. There's another way I could have answered the first game question, which is the first game that we signed. It took longer to get to release, not by much, but a few months, and that was Teran Victa was the first one we signed by John Lumpkin, who previously did the Long War mod for XCOM and for XCOM 2. And he's also just amazing to work with. And that one released a bit later than Old World, like 4 months later or so. It was late 2022. But it was Terra Invicta, and that was just, a great game too. I feel lucky to have worked with these people.
Terra Invicta. There we go. Yeah. Oh, that looks awesome. And these are vastly different games from each other too, is what it looks like. Well, at least different settings. Yeah.
Yeah,
awesome.
They're both quite different. And they're both, when you mention settings, I think the thing that we look for most when we publish is games that are trying to do something new. So Old World wasn't trying to be Civ. It's confined to the ancient Mediterranean. So it's confined geographically and temporally. And by zooming in is able to really offer this ancient experience, in more detail. And Terra Invicta is a similar sort of thing, zooming in to a time that most space strategy games don't deal with. Most of them are like, travel among the stars. They're interstellar games, right? And Terra Invicta is zooming into mankind's first steps into space in time period and zooming into the solar system. So it's a local solar system game where like all the, they've got like 600 different asteroids, modeled in the game. And, you go there and you go to Mercury and you put a base there and such, and it's all confined to the solar system. And by doing this, it's able to do something different than usual space strategy games. It's able to zoom into a different period of time, that transitional time, and actually, play with the local geography of the solar system so that you're thinking about things like putting a base on a moon in Jupiter so that you can support your fleets that are going to the outer solar system and such.
And strategically, like what each of those positions means. I agree with that, actually. A lot of the times we either get like you're on Earth still or you're traveling amongst all of the galaxy. So, that's completely true. It's very rare that we get our solar system is the place that we can explore kind of a game. That's quite cool. I really like that. I hadn't actually played this, but a lot of people in chat have as well. A lot of people have. So people are like, this is awesome. Yeah. So how many games have you guys actually published now?
So we've got 10 games that are released, and a couple of them we signed on to along their way rather than the beginning. For example, a game called Workers and Resources, Soviet Republic, which is sort of putting you in, it's sort of like a, sort of Soviet joke, dark humor kind of thing combined with what is essentially the most detailed city building simulation. And it will have things like you decide what level of party loyalty is required to be able to attend university in your city, and all these sort of like, this sort of like fun little humorous like take on things. And that one we signed on to, it had already been out for like in early access for like 4 years. And we signed on to it late last year in preparation for its 1.0 release that's coming up. A couple others were like that. Also, game Empire: The Undergrowth, that is like you control a colony of ants, and Nebulous Fleet Command, where you sort of like do detailed space battles. So we've signed a couple of those we didn't release. We just signed on during their early access to help bring them to 1.0. The remaining ones we signed on, we took to release. So it's been about 10 total that are out right now and available for purchase, and then another 20 that are in development and are upcoming.
That's awesome, actually. It's quite funny. I didn't even know that you guys had published Empire of the Undergrowth. I already own that game. So
Oh,
I went to college to be an entomologist, an insect scientist, specifically
oh wow,
myrmecology, which is ant science.
oh,
So
wow.
I basically go on Steam and I'm like, I'm going to buy every ant game that exists. I'm going to check out every single one of them, and I just churn through them, and I'm like, oh, this looked when I first got it. God, how long ago was that? It was ages ago. It was absolutely ages ago, and I was like, I'm going to check this out later when it has more content. And now I need to.
Yeah, well, it's got 1.1.0 is coming here in I guess basically a month. So
Oh hell yeah!
yeah, it's at the end of a very long journey. It was like 7 years in early access, which some people have complained about, and I
Yeah,
kind of get it, but at the same time, like if the devs are keeping a game in early access a long time but continuously working on it, I mean, to me that's the height of dedication to like achieving the full vision before declaring it at 1.0. So I'm honestly, like, we've got some games that have done quick early access, like Against the Storm was only about a year from release into EA and then 1.0. But when they keep going for years, I actually like. I don't know. Empire's Under, it's dedication. 7 years they spent like just continuing to improve it, and now it's finally ready to say slap a 1.0 label on it.
yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Like, so about me, since you haven't met me before, you haven't seen my stuff. So I've been in the gaming industry for about 20 years now. I used to work at Blizzard Entertainment. I worked there for 7 years. Started in QA, went and created the team Application Security, which is all of Blizzard's websites globally, all the security for that. Became a senior red team specialist after that. Then I went to Amazon Game Studios and I worked there on the Lumberyard game engine. Then I left that and I hacked power plants for the federal government. So I worked for the Department of Energy.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
Wow!
kind of a jump, right? A little bit of a jump. But the reason why is because have you ever heard of DEF CON before? The convention?
Yes.
So I have 3 black badges from DEF CON. So I got 2 for cryptography and 1 for telefreaking, 3 years in a row. And then the government was like, do you like money? And I was like, I love money. And then they flew me around the country to hack things. It was cool. But after that, I quit because we had 7 people on my team and 4 of them quit at the same time. So they were like, hey, that 10 weeks a year you fly around the country? It's going to be 30 now. And I was like, no, it's not. No, it's not going to
Oh,
happen.
wow.
Because I'd spend more time in hotels than I would at home. It's just not worth
Yeah.
it. So
I
I
know, I
quit.
understand.
I was going to take 2 weeks to figure out what I wanted to do. And I was already making indie games on the side. I'd been doing that for a while. And Jacksepticeye played our game 2 days in to my 2 weeks of figuring out what I wanted to do. And I was like, well, guess I'm doing this. Right. And I've been streaming game development and doing that kind of stuff now for 7 years. And I've never stopped. And I just keep doing
Wow.
that. And most of what I do now is I teach other people how to enter the game industry, show them that they can make indie games, because a lot of people just need kind of that nudge. They just need to be told, yes, you're allowed to. And they go, wait, I can? And it's like, yes, you really can. And then they go
That's
off and
awesome.
make things. And I also host game jams and other things like that as well, and try and put out as many resources as possible to teach people to make this stuff. So,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
a big nerd, basically.
Well, we all are, right?
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny, too, because I usually talk to Chad about the perils of publishers, because you can have good publishers and you can have bad publishers. And what I've seen from you guys is you are doing a very good thing with each of the games that you go with. And the biggest difference that I can see between most good publishers and most bad publishers is exactly what you started this conversation off with, which is the relationship between yourselves and the devs. That relationship fostering is so important between the publisher and the developer to make sure that that is a good and positive relationship, to make sure that they make the best games and then everybody wins. The mutual benefit between the publisher and the developer. So I'm really glad you started off with that, because that's fantastic. Also, I have that freaking sick helmet you guys sent me.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I wore this the other day when I was playing.
Awesome.
I played Bannerlords in the helmet, and it was fantastic. Which is, I actually have at the other house, I have a breastplate for this as well, because I used to be in Ren Fair. So
Oh, cool.
a big heavy metal breastplate, which is cool as hell.
Yeah, that's awesome. Whole outfit.
So I'm interested. What is the general process that you guys use to select a game that's coming? Do you wait for them to come talk to you? Do you guys go out and kind of hunt for ones that you're interested in?
It's a mix, but for the most part, it's like the vast majority of the games haven't been ones who like sent an email to the, like the publishing inbox. Now, that's not to say that we don't look at those, because we do. We spend, we look at every single email that comes in pitching a game very closely, but only a few games so far have come from that. The majority have tended to come from either us looking around and seeing something that really interested us, or quite frequently one of our current developers introducing one of their friends and basically saying, hey, I'd like to introduce developer such, or like introduce this person, I'm friends with them and they've got a game. That referrals from within our current developers. I mean, actually, come to think of it, like there's like a chain that runs from like the Falling Frontier, one of the games we signed, to I think introducing, I think Todd of Falling Frontier introduced me to Greg, the developer of Manor Lords, and then Greg introduced me to the developer of Blacksmith Master, actually, and then there were several others that like flew through these introductions. I think Todd also introduced me to the developer of Nebulous Fleet Command. So like it's there's sort of like this whole chain of introductions that is responsible for I think most of our signings.
That's a really good thing, though. I mean, if a developer is like comfortable enough working with you guys to go to a friend and be like, "Hey, you should get in here and talk to this dude," like that's a really positive sign. Frankly, I think that's really really good. So yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's awesome, man.
Yeah, I think we've got a nice. The developers are, so we've got channels in our Slack for all the developers to hang out. So we've got like a general channel for them to chat, a casual channel for them to chat about other things that are, I guess, more off topic, like pets channel, and then like a development focused channel where they can like talk about programming and such. And so it's sort of a nice community. It's funny because you mentioned the things of other publishers. I mentioned before to another publisher that we've got these channels for all of our developers to hang out and talk to each other, and their eyes sort of widened, and they basically said, "You don't want to do that. That's going to cause trouble. That's not going to work." And I still don't know what they had in mind. What's the fear of having people talk to each other? But
they'll find out about the deals the other one is getting. Oh no! Like, it's like, dude, come on. Yeah, no, it's kind of funny. Our Discord is structured largely the same, so I've got sections in there for kind of different things that they want to learn. Anything that people want to learn, like programming, writing, voice acting, whatever it comes down to. And I put them out into structured areas, so you don't have to look at the channels unless you want to. So they choose a role. They can go and see that whole section and interact with an entire sub community of people that are into that same thing, so they can learn from them and like kind of grow that skill set. And it works really well, man. Like it works super well, especially when you get kind of cross-pollination between devs. Because if you do, and the devs talk to each other and they learn something from each other, their games get better. And if you're publishing all of their games, everybody wins. So like, no, I'm glad you built it as a community more than, an isolation pit, because I see that a lot too. It's weird, man. Like it doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't. Devs need to grow from each other, and then everybody wins when you do that. So.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that's super awesome, man. So where were you before you started publishing games? What did you do before this?
So nothing too relevant. So I bounced around a bit. So I was I went to law school and then was a lawyer for about a year. Didn't really enjoy it very much. I mean, it was okay, but it definitely wasn't where I wanted to spend my career. So then I went back to school to study regional studies, East Asia, just, Chinese language, the regional politics, that sort of thing. After that, I was a consultant for McKinsey and Company, which, well, I didn't enjoy that. So sometime very quickly after that, I went back to school again, in this time for a PhD program in ancient Chinese history. And I did not get the PhD though. I got flushed out at the terminal master's. So I took I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the program very well. My advisor was amazing. It was a great program. But I just sort of decided I want to be an academic. So I finished all the classes and really enjoyed the classes and learning and studying history. And then it was time to sort of start doing my own 3-year, 4-year of writing and my dissertation. And then at that point, it was just, I sort of realized academic career wasn't for me. So went out of that, and then sort of I was doing modding in my spare time. So I created a mod. So there's a DLC for Mountain Blade Warband called Viking Conquest. And I really liked the DLC, but a few things bothered me about weapon distribution on some units and some stats. And I was like, I'll just create a quick mod, called it VC Balance Mod, do 12 quick changes that'll make, solve the things that bothered me the most. Of course, I got to version 13 and it was 10 pages, single spaced of a change log. It just kept going and going. And so, I was enjoying all this. And then at the end of it, I thought well, this is really fun. I really want to be involved in game development, through this modding thing. But, I didn't think I had much to offer, I think, in the end, in terms of actual doing of development, as much as I wish I was a creative genius creating a wonderful game. It seems I'm not. But I felt I had something to offer otherwise in publishing. I could use a little bit of my background as a lawyer, a little bit of my background in business, a little bit of, like a little bit of here or there, but mainly just wanted to do it and thought there was an area to do it. And so I founded Hooded Horse. And then the first game, I was actually a huge fan of the Long War mod for XCOM. So, basically the first game I sort of saw, Teran Victa was there progressing along, got in touch with the developer, and we started working together, and then everything sort of built from there.
That's awesome. Honestly, like having that background in even just modding, like that development kind of background is huge. Like I see that quite a lot. There's so many people working inside of the publishing space that are businessmen first, and they don't know what it's like making something. They don't know the kind of feeling of creating something. They don't understand what that's like to build, So even like that, in that way, where you had that experience, I guarantee that's made you a better publisher. Guaranteed, because that sets the stage for all of that, man. And choosing the support class of I'm going to help other people get their games out there is awesome as shit, frankly. I think it's a really cool way to go, man. I think it's really, really good. So yeah, now props to you on that. That's awesome.
I mean, I've enjoyed it, and it's a very small bit of pride. You could every individual game is about the creator of that game, the development team, and what they did. But yeah, that support role of knowing that, hey, I helped them out a bit, and then knowing you can do that across a lot of games, it's very fulfilling.
That's good. So how about the tough question then? What is the time where you guys feel that as a publishing house you have failed? What's the one time that you feel you failed the most, even if you pivoted it into a win?
Now that's interesting. That's one I have to think about for a moment, because I don't want to just give you a canned answer. Let me think.
Because there's always one that doesn't work, and you learn something from it, but it didn't work,
So I think that I would first sort of talk about the different ways of failure, because I think that's important here. And what I mean by that is if you take an individual game, I think there's sort of 3 points or 3 ways to look at success or failure. One way is from the perspective of the players. Did they get something that they really enjoy, and that they feel good about their purchase? Another one is from the perspective of the developer. Was it a success for the developer? Were they supported? Did they get the ability to continue in operations? Even because most games development can be very hit or miss driven, right? And there's more flops than there are successes. So the fundamental measure sets for developer, I think, was it sustainable? Did the game do well enough they can keep operations, they can go on to make another game? Or even it's great when they can grow too, but just being in a good place for the developer. That's probably the second type of success. And then the third type of success is the success from the perspective of the publisher as a financial project, right? And that's the type of success is, did I lose money on that game? Was that game profitable for me as a publisher? That type of success. And I think these successes or failures, you can, to some degree, no one has the power to be successful in all 3. No publisher can be found in the principle that we will always be successful in all 3 of these measures. But I think you can choose between them, and choose which ways you want to fail. And in many sense, the way we've structured Hooded Horse from top to bottom is choosing that if and when we fail, which we will and do, it will be failing in the sense of financial success for us on an individual project. And I need to explain that a bit, because I don't want to come off as altruistic, because actually I think it's a good way to be, but I also think there's something sort of that makes sense about it too. So if we take first and talk about a sort of mainstay of publishing contracts, which I very much don't agree with, and we've moved and we don't use, which is 100% recoup terms, where the publisher will recover first. All of the sales will go towards recovering the publisher's costs before any sales revenue goes to the developer.
It's devastating. That kind of a deal is absolutely devastating in the market. So I'm glad you said that. Anyway,
yeah, no, it's terrible. It's terrible. It leads to, so many games fail and the people blame the developers, and it's well, we know what happened. They were buried under recoup. No matter what they did ever, they were never going to get out from under that and see any money from the game and be able to support themselves. They can't support. So the recoup terms in essence are structured around the publisher picking among those three types of successes and failures. When you set up recoup terms, you're basically saying the most important thing is that the financial product to the publisher succeeds, because it's very protective of that, right? Like getting all of the money until the money comes back that the publisher put in is essentially saying, I will not fail in the sense of financial project
There's no risk for the publisher then.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, exactly. And sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say at that point, there's no risk for the publisher. If the game fails, they don't care because they've already made their financials back, and at that point, it's just pure profit. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's them picking that measure of success will always be successful, but it's also them picking to sacrifice the other two measures, right? Because the consequence to the developer is the developer gets no money until it gets back. It makes it much more likely to fail for the developer sustainability, and it also makes it much more likely to fail for players to get because like every game, sometimes games release rough. No one can prevent that. But if the developer is getting, money coming in and revenue coming in, they can still make it better. But if they're not, then they won't. Then it's over. So it also makes it much more likely that games that could be improved after release answer player complaints and turn into a successful game for the players instead don't, because they're not going to get the support and expansion because there's nothing there for the developer. So it picks to prioritize success for the publisher as a financial product and to deprioritize the other two and thus fail in that way when things go badly. So Hooded Horse, we're sort of the opposite in what we've picked as our way to fail. We don't use those recoup terms. We use flat percentages with the developers. We don't also, and this is sort of like a deeper point about where you put your attention and investment, we don't prioritize things by return on investment. And we're not doing anything like, a lot of publishers, they look for like, oh, we'll have 4 flops, we'll have 1 success. That 1 success will put all of our efforts into pushing even further because we get the best ROI on that. Mm-hmm. By making that one even more successful, we'll get more dollars. We do it very much the opposite way. If a project is struggling, we're in marketing or otherwise, we're going to put more effort into it. And so what this ends up doing is we've picked that we can fail on a game as a financial product to us as a publisher, but we don't want to fail the consumers and players, and we don't want to fail the developer. We want it to be a success for them. And the thing about all this is like it's not really self-sacrificial at all, because and I'm not wanting to
long-term. It's long-term benefit. Yeah,
exactly. Because we build that reputation.
I see too often now, even other companies too, like not even just in the publishing space, ones that sacrifice their long-term success for a short-term gain, for a quarterly earning. You guys are taking the opposite direction, which is what it should be, which is we're building a relationship. We're in this for the long haul. Everybody's going to win in the end. And we might lose a little bit of ground right now, but who cares? Because we can get there where we're going to make more money overall by the end of this. Yeah, no, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and the fundamental thing about all this is like it's okay if some of our games don't make money for us, but it's not okay if it doesn't make money for the developers, because the developers only have one game. And that's what's so perverse about recoup terms is because, and this goes back to, having been a lawyer, like there's a basic principle of what is a good contract. And that principle is that you allocate the risk to the party best able to bear that risk. And the truth is publishers have diversified portfolios of many games. They are not vulnerable. They can bear the risk of individual projects failing financially for them. But developers have either one game or very few, and they can't bear that risk. So there's just no logical reason, except, to be perfectly frank, a bunch of short-sighted publishers who are using their bargaining power to create these risk-averse terms that don't make sense for anyone.
Yeah, it ends up being a parasite instead of a safety net that way. You guys are operating as a safety net, and that's honestly how it should be. That's how it should be, man. I've seen a long time of publishers just kind of acting that way, and I think the only other one that I know of that operates in the way that you are describing right now is Devolver Digital. That's probably the only other one that I see that's like that. And
Devolver's great.
They're fantastic. They're super good. And I've talked to a number of different developers, like some of them are my friends that have worked with them, and they operate largely, as far as I've seen, under the same kind of terms that you are describing, which is fantastic. So I think it is absolutely a recipe for success, and I don't think it's unique. I think it is a recipe for success that can be repeated, which is surprising, seeing as how many publishers are out there that just fall on their face and then everyone loses. Because they're going the opposite direction, which is shooting for short-term gain and trying to rip as much money out of the developer as possible. And I just don't think, not only does it not work for the publisher, it doesn't work for the dev, it doesn't work for the players, and everybody loses at the end. Annapurna is a really good one as well. Yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely. I don't know what their terms are though. That's a black box for me on that one. Yeah. No, this is really good, man. This is really good. So, with that in mind, that we've talked about the fair. What do you think is the greatest success that you guys have made as a publisher for a game? Not the game itself, but what you have provided to them that has impacted that game in some way.
That's interesting. It's one of those things that after the you never like I definitely feel like we've helped the games that we've been with, but I would also, there's a part of me that always recognizes that it's hard to tell like what you did. And these developers in most cases would have been successful without us. And hopefully we added to that and made it more successful. And hopefully we did make a difference. But the problem with that question, and it's not that I'm trying to avoid answering it, it's just that it's so hard to parse out what we did, and it would require to answer it. I'd have to be able to sort of like say like, oh, that much of that success was ours. But the truth is, we're in such a support role to the developers to sort of like just spreading what it is, their great game, as wide as we can. But it's so hard to tell what it would have been otherwise that I don't really know definitely enough to claim anything about any of them, except to say that I hope we help them all as much as we can.
No, good. That's a good answer, man. It's you're not dodging the question. You're telling it more realistically. Because to be honest with you, if you're having a partnership with another group, it's both of your gain, frankly, at the end of the day. And there's no like, oh, we did that, and the developer wouldn't have had that without us. It's like, no, you guys were able to do it because the developer's doing well. Developer's able to do that because you're doing well. And without both sides of that coin, it doesn't work. So I agree with that. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense to me, actually. So here's something that I find to be interesting. Have you guys ever handled the localization for games? Because I'm finding more and more that publishers are handling that. And yes. I've seen really bad mixed results a lot of the time. We do all of our publishing or all of our localization in-house because we found like native speakers that understand my horrific brand of dad humor. And then they can localize that into other jokes. And a lot of people don't realize this. Localization is not just translation. Localization is, if I have a joke, a pun in English that's like, the door is jammed, it's not even strawberry, right? Like, that's funny in English, and you could say it's not, but it is. I don't care, right? You're not going to stop me with that. But if you translate that into Brazilian Portuguese, the joke doesn't work anymore because those words don't mean the same thing. Jam doesn't mean a fruit preserve and the door being stuck in, Brazilian Portuguese. So you have to localize the joke. You have to make sure that it works in the same circumstance, but with different words or with a different direction for the joke. And it's not easy to do. So do you guys outsource that out? Do you have a team internally? Like, how do you handle localization for these games?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do handle all the localization for games we publish. We have our producers and production department works on that. We also have a localization coordinator as a full-time job, Miguel, and he sort of, assists in all that and making it as easy as possible on the developers to sort of like go through the process of the initial localization, the localization quality assurance step because once the game is localized, then it's time to have native speakers go in and play the game and see all the localization in the context. And so play it for, a couple of weeks and make reports and note anything that needs to be changed. And then that goes through another round. I mean, it is a very, very involved context. So it's something that we definitely, and it happens towards the end when the developers are busy. So it's something that we want to make as painless as possible on them. There's always some, developers there's always something like localization quality assurance finds that there's something about the UI that needs to be adjusted or something that they have to do. So there's always some localization bugs that have to be sort of fixed. But so we try to, take as much of it as we can. And we have a mix of localizers that we use. So I think it's maybe 5 languages, we've got in-house people to do the localizations. And the others, though, because like mini games, like I think Manor Lords is in 19 languages, we don't have all of those in-house. And there's been some really good firms that we work with, and we work with, several different firms that are located in different regions, and basically go through with them for the localization. We do cross checks, of course, and all the checking on that. So there's this whole process, because you're right, it really has to be, carefully checked, done in multiple rounds. Everything needs to be checked. Localization is so easy to go awry. So
it's super tough. I remember we had We had a thing in Brazil because our translator was very early on. We had a translator from Brazil, and they translated a joke that I had into this joke that was funny in most of Brazil. And then in one part of Brazil, it was slang for a sex act. And we're like, God damn it.
Oh, wow.
We didn't find out until it was public. And I was like, great. But we were such a small studio at the time. It was like, oh, we got a demo out. What's up? So we had to go and change it. And I was like, great, dude. Because this kind of stuff happens. Localization's really tough, and you not only do you have to localize the game, but you have to find all of the local slang. You have to figure out what people are actually saying, find out what any of that kind of stuff is. And it's difficult, man. It's not an easy thing to do. So Chad has actually got a question for you. Let's say I finished making a game. I just finished making a game. So they're finished with the entire process. They like where it is. What would be the value of me going to a publisher instead of self-publishing with a finished game?
So I think that, we could basically separate logically out two roles for publishers. And one role is marketing, distribution, sales, strategic partnerships, localization, all those sort of things, right? So that's sort of like the services a publisher provides. And marketing, of course, is the chief there, but, like forming partnerships and making deals, that's all important too. So basically that's one function of publishers, the things that they do. The other function of publisher is as financier, right? Providing funding for development. There's no reason those have to be united into like a single entity and done by a publisher. They have been traditionally a lot, but there are a lot of different options for financing. Some, like in your case, essentially you're talking about a developer who self-funded and handled the financing themselves and complete on their own. There are investors of various kinds that put money into games. There's all sorts of options for financing that exist outside of just publishers, and it's worth considering what is the best way to do that for an individual development studio based on what their goals are. We work in, depending on the game, we've got both kind of deals. So we have some games that we publish are like we're publishing a game called Menace, and it's from the developers. Their prior game was Battle Brothers. And we publish a game called Nova Roma, and their prior game was Kingdoms and Castles. And both Kingdoms and Castles and Battle Brothers were huge hits on Steam. Those developers did not need financing from anyone. Their prior self-published title finance the whole thing. So they just needed us for the other side of things, which is essentially the core of what we do, the marketing, distribution, sales, strategic partnerships, so forth. So probably I think the majority of games we have are like that. It's developers who, for one reason or another, from having prior hits or from other reasons, have fully financed their game and are looking to basically just use us as a publisher. That's the majority of our games. We also have a minority of them, but they're there, who have also asked us to do financing of their project. So some amount of development funding. Usually they've done a little bit of it themselves. They've gotten started, that sort of thing. So it's often a joint kind of thing, but basically have turned to us to provide additional funding. And the truth is, with both of those arrangements, it's very flexible, right? Like we have to ask for a bit more revenue if we're providing financing, because then we need a return on that.
Yep.
But it's they essentially become the same sort of relationship because the financing fundamentally isn't that important. It's sort of, it can be attached to the relationship or not, and so I would say that there's no, so that's the first part of my answer. The second part of my answer is to say that, like, if you've got the game completed, I think, if you don't need financing, then you end up a little freer. You should always feel free, by the way, even if you need financing, to not feel like you need to get a publisher, because there are other options you could look into for that component of things. But if you have the financing squared away, it does mean that your options are a little bit more open to self-publish. And on that, I'd say that, I don't want to be mean on this call, but personally, if I had a game, I would not sign with 90% of publishers that exist out there.
I would agree with that. I don't think that's mean. I think that's correct.
Okay. So, because there are resources that you can learn to, this is the thing, is developers who learn, who go out there. If you're the kind of person that you're willing to go out there and you're willing to start reading and learning and thinking about all these marketing things and trying your best to do on your own, you can get yourself to a state where you're 90%. You're better than 90% of publishers at doing it. And you won't charge yourself, and you'll care a lot more about your game. And in particular, you won't make certain mistakes that I see publishers often make, which is when marketing a game, trying to market it as something else that isn't quite the game, but they think fits better into some other popular game. Like basically trying to force it. Yeah. So basically, self-published games don't fall into that. They know that they should present their game honestly and with its unique points, not rather trying to force it into something else. So I think self-publishing is a fine way to go if you're willing to learn about all that and engage with all of that. And, depending on which publishers and how you judge their performance, and you should always look at their performance. Like there is a site called Gamealytic, which is very good because it will basically, if you look up any publisher on Gamealytic, it will show you their full history of all of their games. You can sort it by date released, and you can sort of see like, okay, well, what results do this publisher get? Are they getting, are they flopping more games than succeed? Are they providing consistent service? Do they put all their efforts only into the games doing the best? So if you
Do
look
they
at
abandon
publisher,
their players or anything like that? You look in the background, yeah.
yeah, and look at things like the median performance of the publisher, which is much more important because the average can be dragged up by viral hits, right? And basically you can do all this research and really analyze: is this a good publisher who's just riding the couple of successes and just playing that like mini VC game of like I'll put money into 5 games, 4 of them will flop, 1 will succeed. You never want to work with something opportunistic or predatory. So it is entirely possible to self-publish your game, to read up on all the resources and do a better job than 90% of publishers.
I remember the moment that I wanted to self-publish our game Heartbound. I remember the exact moment that it was. We had won the PAX 10. So this was a couple of years back, and we were at PAX, and a publisher approached us up there and said that he wanted to pitch me a deal right there on the floor. And I was like, okay, let's talk about this. And I showed him all about the business, about what we were doing and everything like this. And I was streaming on Twitch, and that was kind of our main way of showing the game off to the world, which it still is. And I said, if you were to change one thing about my business right now, what would it be? And he said, I'd stop streaming on Twitch.
Oh, wow.
I was like, okay. What would you do instead? He goes, I'd start streaming on Mixer. And I was like, here's all the analytics for Mixer. Mixer is incredibly unstable. Here's where they've implemented a currency that has effectively turned all of the viewers into bots, because what Mixer had done is they created this system called Sparks. Sparks were given to you like channel points on Twitch, but they were global. So what had ended up happening was everybody would run Mixer on their phone in their desk to farm points so that they could go and give them to their favorite streamer at the end of the day. So they've turned their viewership into an army of bots. I said the moment they open up for advertising revenue, the advertisers are going to put ads up, get ridiculously low click-through rates, and it's going to fall. The whole thing's going to fold up. And it did 3 months later. So when I brought this up to the dude, he just went red in the face, and like that was kind of the end of the conversation. I realized right then, I was like, these are people trying to sell my game that don't know anything about the industry that I'm in. They don't know anything about the streaming industry. They don't know anything about games, and they just want a piece of the pie. And I saw that time and time and time again, and it's super awful, frankly. So I would absolutely agree with you when you say there is a time and a place to publish your own game, but you have to do the research. You have to know your subject matter. You have to know what you're doing. And the only way you can do that is by going out and looking for it. So he's completely right. And then on top of it, yeah, the moment you do that, you're better than 90% of the ones out there. I agree with that too. There's a lot of bad publishers out there that just want to cut a deal, and they want to tell you that they're going to sell you the world and that your game is going to be perfect and sell millions of copies. And when it doesn't, they're going to be sitting there with a 100% recoup fee, and you're going to have nothing. And it sucks.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's quite rough. We got a couple more from the chat. Let's see. How do you pick which game to publish? Which is kind of interesting, because at that point, it's like you guys are probably getting hundreds of requests or dozens of requests that you get. What makes a game stand out to you? Because there's always going to be a standout. But what is it that catches your eye the most? And how do you distribute that to the team, and who makes the final decision? Do you guys do it as a team? Is there a whole process for this?
Yeah, there's so the process is, so I still am sort of I guess I'm the final step in scouting because, and I look a lot myself too, but I'm not so very impressed with my own self, so such that I think that I should be making decisions as like, oh, I'm the final decision. Instead, it's more of a consensus forming, and it's a consensus forming around myself and a couple other members of the company who are highly involved in this. And we all sort of really look at it. And talk about it, figure out what it is, and it's if there's not a consensus. I mean, this is actually how a lot of things run with us. It's how we work with our developers too. Like it's like consensus should be the basis of things, because if you're reasonable people, you can keep talking and figure it out, right?
Yeah.
And when it comes to sort of like deciding which games to publish, we are being very, like there's tons of games that'll make money that we turn down, and there's like lots of money. And we turn them down for all sorts of reasons. Sometimes it's portfolio fit because we do have a focus. We like strategic and tactical games, and we're
noticed. Yeah, you have a brand.
Yeah, and we're saying that because we don't really know. Like, I don't know if we go too far from that, and it's not just. And the reason we say strategic and tactical is a lot. Some of the games we publish probably wouldn't be described as primarily a strategy game, but they are games that incorporate strategic and tactical elements, which is what we think are important. And that sort of gets to it, which is that what we're most looking for, I think, is something that offers a unique experience, something that offers something you can't get elsewhere, a new take on things that is creative and that players will perceive as such and have a reason to really fall in love with and say, this is the game. This game offers me this experience that I've been wanting. Because there's, we stay away from just like, oh, this is another game. Sell, which there are a lot of games like that, but that's not what we like to do.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the games that we've released so far, I think it accurately describes them. That is to say, if you look at Nebulous Fleet Command, for example, which is a game that it's not for everyone. It's a game for people, but it is a game for people who want that game to absolutely fall in love with, because it's a game of sort of like this hard sci-fi look at what space warfare might be, complete with electronic countermeasures and all sorts. I mean, it's an incredibly complex game.
Yeah, I played Eve for 15 years, so I was big into that, like super into the end game of that. I was alliance leader of about 1,200 players in that. My chat showed me this game like maybe 2 weeks ago, and I was like, wow, that is ridiculously in depth, like ridiculously so. And I was like, this is awesome, frankly. So no, I super agree. Nebulous Fleet Command looks cool as shit, and it's nice to see. It's nice for me to see that kind of in-depth sort of, space combat sim. It really is, because there's so much you can do there because you don't have to care about gravity. Just build a big ball of guns. It's fine. Just do it. And this is the big thing. Look at this, chat. Look at this. Look at the subsystem. Look at the subsystem map. Look how ridiculous you can make that. And any of that can get damaged, dude. It's like the Dwarf Fortress of space. Look at it. I love that, man. I played Dwarf Fortress for years as well, so seeing so many little micro components that can take damage or lead to a different outcome because a micro component has been damaged or moved or runs out of power or whatever it is that's going on is quite compelling. I think that's really, really cool. Super cool, actually.
That GIF that's part of the marketing thing I was talking about earlier, and that like you have to show people honestly what the game is so that you get the right people, because that GIF, I guarantee you, turns off some people from buying Nebulous Fleet Command.
Yes.
But that's a good thing, because it gets people the game who will love the game. They're the ones who buy it because they get excited by that.
Yeah, it's the same reason that I put out a demo, because I tell people, I'm like, don't buy the game. Go play the demo. It might not be for you. And if you like the demo, you might like the game. And the demo is actually the first full chapter of the game. It's like an hour-long demo. And I was like, just go play that. And if you like it, you might like what I'm doing. And if you don't, I get it. That's fine, right? Because like it's so easy to get wrapped up in like a hype trailer and be like, wow, that's the game for me. And then you get in there like, what the hell are all these menus? There's a million menus, right? But if you're putting this front and center, be like, look how in-depth this is. You're going to catch a different kind of audience that specifically wants that. And likely you're going to have a much better time, So yeah, I completely agree with that.
And that's everything. It's like the games that we select are like Nebulous Fleet Command. They're games that, they don't have to. I mean, the actual size of the market is not the primary thing. It's how much are people going to intensely love it, who this game is for. And that, I think, describes pretty much all of our games, and they're all appealing. I mean, Teran Victa, which we mentioned earlier, Workers and Resources, Old World, Clanfolk, which is a game about, it's basically a non-violent colony sim about historical Scotland and growing a family. And it's like, normal colony sim is like people chopping off arms and crazy stuff happening. And Clanfolk, it's like you might get like a little fisticuffs occasionally, but it's primarily a peaceful sort of like, here's historically what a what a family clan would look like and grow in historical Scotland. And for people who want that, that's the only place they can get that. And that's what we're going for with all of the games, is sort of like something unique, something to love that will have a group of players who love it.
You know what's interesting? I didn't even know that about Clanfolk. I'd seen this pop up in my feed many, many times, and I was like, oh, that's probably covered in blood and dismemberment. Like all of the games that are like this. The fact that that offers a completely different experience makes that more compelling to me. Like, because I've never seen that before in kind of this sort of space. That's wild. That's really interesting, actually.
Yeah, really. And then against the Storm, roguelike city builder, it's that's the thing. It's like, it's just all of them have something unique to love. And that's the great thing. Is like with a game like that, as long as you don't like go into crazy production budgets, which some project, like you don't have some insane, like just you don't bury the project under a giant financial cost. As long as it's sort of a reasonably small team, which is what we tend to work with, or medium-sized team, like they will succeed because there's something there to love. You don't have to appeal to everyone in the world. You just have to appeal to a group of people who love the game, and the game will be a success.
Yeah, no, I super agree with that. It's one of the things that I tried very early on when we were just starting our studio. Is we had a arcade game called Champions of Breakfast. And the first thing I did, I was like, the way that you succeed is by getting in front of big streamers, right? And we made all this art for like all these different major streamers, and we put it out there and we sent them emails and all this kind of stuff, and not a single one responded. And I was like, this isn't the way to do this. I was like, I'm approaching this from my background in AAA. This makes no goddamn sense. Why would I want, like, if I were a major streamer at the time, right? I was like, if I were a major streamer, why would I want to play this game? No one's ever heard of it. I'm taking a big risk on it, and I'm just kind of shoving people onto a studio that's not even ready for it anyway. So I doubled down on community. I was like, we should just show the community everything. And I made a Discord. We started making social media accounts. We started talking to every one of the players. We started taking feedback and learning from them and doing that entire kind of thing to build up all of that. And eventually what happened, I think it was about 5 months later, is, God, it's funny because it's wild to even think about it. It was Team 4-Star played our little arcade game, and they contacted me. They're like, hey, we want to play your game as Goku. And I was like, what? Yeah, so Team 4-Star ended up playing our little arcade game, and it wasn't because we reached out to them. It's because their community had reached out to them and said, hey, I really want you to play this game. Look at this silly game. And I realized then, like, community means more than anything else. And it kind of untrained me from that AAA sort of thinking of like throw money at it and then it'll, market itself. So, yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense to me to go that direction. It really does. And I've had a lot of experience going through that.
Yeah, community is great. I mean, like, I think it's one of the things that drove Manor Lords to the success it had, was just such a strong community.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I super agree with that. And I really love the take that, if you can confirm this too, because I didn't see any paperwork on it or any proof of it. People were saying that people had come to you and said, oh, why don't you guys hire a bunch more devs to get the game out faster? And the claim was that you guys had said, no, like, games can take a long time. That's okay. And just let him work, let the devs work on this.
I think that was it was an interview in PC Gamer. So there's an article out there that's where it comes from. I mean, the thing is, it has to be, I mean, it's everything that it's that it has to be driven by Greg's vision as a developer. And that's, and we've been very clear. It's not that, it's not that there won't be growth. It's just, it can't, like, they think that there's some people who think like, oh, if you just hire a bunch of developers today, like they'll get their updates faster immediately post release. And of course, it would actually slow it down, right? Like if there was a bunch of hiring immediately, it would slow things down. And it just has to be growth that matches the developer's vision, that is consistent with what they want as a studio, that allows to preserve sort of the whole approach that has made the game what it is. So yeah, it's got to be slow, and it's got to be the developer's decision.
Okay. So here's an interesting one. What do you guys have in place in case a developer wants to stop working on a game?
I guess we would talk to them and figure it out. Like that's the thing, is that a lot of these, well, this gets to a contract thing, and like my background as a lawyer, my thoughts on how contracts should be. So our contracts are actually really readable. They're not like reference this area, reference that area, and a bunch of jargon. They're actually like, around 10 pages, and you can just read start to finish and everything makes sense. And part of that is not pre-preparing for everything in the world, but rather relying on the fact that there can be negotiation in good faith to figure out what's best and what can be done. We do have provisions. We do have a provision in the contracts if like the developer becomes incapacitated or something happens to prevent them from like getting the game to 1.0. We put provisions in that sort of would allow us to sort of step in and try to, because that's about living up to promises to the players and the people who may have bought it and such like that. But generally speaking, in the long term, there's I think there would have, we could always talk to developers and figure something out, and even in that circumstance, we would, because we'd want to do it in a way the developer wants. But I think the more fundamental thing about all this is that it is true that we're all familiar with the model of there's some much larger companies that are focused very much on DLC, right? There must be endless DLC.
DLC, microtransactions, just shove as many things into it as possible, Yeah.
And to be clear, I've got no problem with DLC. Like substantive expansions that like add to the game, I think are great. Like continued, obviously not like day one season pass type things, but like in the long term, game expansions are something that I think are great and can be DLC. But we don't have like this focus where it's every game has to continuously forever produce DLC. And there are cases where like you'll see games turned into basically like the original developers want to move on, so basically things are kept, but DLC must continue to be produced, and that can be tricky because when like there's cases where bring on new developers to do that and such, that can get tricky. And I don't think we don't have an approach where there must be endless DLC. There's like, it's something, it's driven by the developer's vision, what they want to do, what they see as the game, what they think should be added to the game. And frankly, it's all post 1.0 though, because like when the game's in early access, but like Old World has put out DLC and it's been very well received. Players like it, they're all positively reviewed DLC. And Against the Storm is going to have a DLC that, and because it's post 1.0, it's, it's going to be a great one. It's, content players want. All that's fine, but it just doesn't have to be a mandate that everything has to go on forever, I think is the important thing.
I honestly agree with that. I find too often in the industry we're trying to push games to be this never-ending experience, but then we have games that are amazing, like Outer Wilds, right? Where you just have this experience that you can play once. It is fantastic, and then that's it, and that's totally fine, And I find more often people are like, no, it's got to last 10,000 hours, and it needs to be an hour of gameplay per dollar, and it's just not necessary. You can just have a very nice experience. You can be done with it, and that can be it, and there's nothing wrong with that. So yeah, no, I agree. It doesn't always need infinite DLC. It doesn't need any of that. It definitely increases the amount of revenue for things. We've seen that pretty dramatically. Same with microtransactions. But if it sacrifices the core vision of the game for profit, then you're going to end up with no players anyway. So there won't be anyone to buy it.
When it really comes down to it, I think also there's the creative drive of developers has to be there. And like eventually if a developer decides like, even if there is still, like market demand for DLC or something, a developer can reasonably decide, I've been working on this game. I brought it to 3A, I brought it to 1.0. I released a couple DLC. They were well received. And now creatively, I feel like I need to move on to a new project. It's totally legitimate to feel that way. We don't want to like chain developers to their desks for like, force them to work on one project for like decades, because that may not be what they want. Like they may have a vision for a new game. And, and I think fundamentally, most of our developers are not primarily like profit, and what brings the most money to them is not the primary driver of what they want to do or how they make their decisions. Like they love their games. They want to improve them for the sake of it, and they'll have new ideas and they'll want to pursue that too. And I think that's great.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. So as a publisher, what do you think is the one thing that developers overlook the most that you are surprised by?
Yeah. Let me think.
Stumped him again.
Yeah. No, I want to give you a real answer.
No, it's good. It's good. I'm glad that you pause and you give real answers on this, man. Like I really am, because there's so many times where it's like a canned answer or a dodge answer from a lot of people, and you're not giving that. So thank you.
Yeah, let me think. Well, I think if I were by developers, meaning including all the people who send us like pitch decks or something to the publishing inbox, to some degree, I've noticed people don't really think about like when they do their calculations, like, in pitch decks, when they're like, oh, we'll sell this many copies and that will lead to this much revenue, and they'll do a projection for how much money they'll make, and it'll be like proving that the game will be a success. And sometimes actually it proves the opposite, because the thing is they're forgetting a lot of factors. So like what will happen is they'll say, okay, well, we intend to sell the game for $29.99, and then they multiply it by how many copies they think will sell, and then they deduct, like they are aware of like, the cut of the store, right? The 30% from Steam cuts. They'll deduct that. They'll say that will make this much money, right? But the thing is, it's generally not even close, because they're forgetting that there is, first of all, regional pricing. That if you put your game up, and you actually want it to sell much to consumers, and to frankly offer, actually be accessible and affordable so people can enjoy it in some other countries, you have to use regional pricing, because otherwise you're asking people in large parts of the world to basically put, a month's salary into buying your game, and that's not really fair to them. So basically, regional pricing, is important and needs to be used for those currencies. As a consequence, you don't like put $29.99 for your game and multiply a copy sold. You really, if your game's going to be priced $29.99 in the US, you need to understand that the average price paid is going to be much less. It might be something close. It might be closer to $19.99, because there's various regions that that need a lower price and they need to be averaged in. And that's only the first step, because then you also have to realize there's things like VAT, and that tax will come out of the amount. And really, in the end, usually it's as much as a difference of like, when you start trying to factor in these factors, like it's half of what they think it might be, in projections they send. Go ahead.
It's honestly like regional pricing is just so important too. I actually talk to my community about it all the time, because when we first put out our demo, we had a massive amount of interest from Brazil, but the game was $10. And like we were planning on making it $10 US. And that's so outside of the price point for Brazil. And there's so much piracy in Brazil that just wouldn't, like, people would just end up pirating it. But I always feel that piracy is an issue of economics and distribution. It's a purchasing power problem. It's not people being jerks. So we ended up making the game 60% off in Brazil, which I can see for you guys as well. You're doing roughly the same thing. It's about 54% off for most of your games, which makes complete sense, because that's around the same price point that we're doing. So we made the game, I think it was 20 BRL in Brazil and $10 US. And 25% of our overall income from game sales came from Brazil. And it was not even the cheapest price. They could have done it in Argentina or anything else like that if they were using VPNs, like people claimed for that. But it was about 25% of the overall income of the game was Brazil, because it was just such a massive audience, so huge. Absolutely enormous. So even though it was so cheap, it was just so many people that it was like, we wouldn't have gotten any money from there. You could choose to make nothing, or you can choose to make something and have a thriving community there. And I honestly believe that regional pricing is so huge. It's so massive now. And I find that to be overlooked a lot of the times by people. They're just like, no, make it flat across the world. It's like, why, dude? You're not going to sell any copies that way. You're going to get pirated everywhere, Yep. So there is a giant elephant in the world of publishing that is happening right now, and we're going to have to talk about it. What is your take on the entirety of this Sony and Helldivers 2 situation?
I'm very glad that they reversed course. And I think that was, I'm very glad, especially for the CEO of Arrowhead. He's such a nice person. He actually tweeted out in support of Manor Lords like some weeks before release. He made a really nice tweet talking about how much he's looking forward to playing Manor Lords. And, you can just see in every one of his interactions with the community how genuine a person he is, how he likes to interact with his community honestly. The statement he made, shortly after release when he was saying, hey, the servers, they're being overloaded. Just wait to buy. You can wait to buy and come. That sort of statement. It's exactly the way people should communicate with their communities. So I honestly, he's such a nice guy, and I'm really glad things in the end went the way they did, because you could see the relief for him. I mean, if you look at if you look at his Twitter, you can see that, and it's nice to see, because he deserves that.
Yeah. No, I super agree with that. Actually, I have a really cool announcement. One moment. We were waiting for this. Oh, wait, no. I don't have a cool announcement. So this is kind of interesting. Can you see the stream right now?
I was actually not doing it because I was worried about messing something.
No, you're totally good. You can watch the stream. Yeah. So
okay.
we noticed something, and this hasn't been reverted yet. So Sony claimed that they would be not restricting the game on PSN for all these 177 regions. Instead, they actually removed the ability to buy the game in those regions. And it's been 3 days now, and they're still not able to purchase the game in those regions. They technically can play over PSN or without PSN, but no one there can buy the game. So I don't know if Sony actually reversed their opinion on this, which is quite weird to watch. And while it does fit to the letter what they said they would do, it doesn't actually fix the problem, which I'm waiting to see how long it takes for them to fix this, frankly.
It might be something in process. Sometimes, especially with
hoping.
larger companies, things can take a little while. I hope they'll restore it. And it might just be taking a little while to do so.
That's my hope as well. It's concerning, I think is the best word. The reason Japan is on this list, by the way, this is the global version of the game. And the global version of the game can't have Japan on it because Japan has their own version, because they have strict laws about certain things in terms of microtransactions and things like that, and in-game currencies. You'll see the same kind of a thing in certain areas of the world, like China has very strict sort of guidelines on human remains in games. We had to go through all of that for World of Warcraft, Wrath of the Lich King, which was a nightmare. Putting that out in China was an absolute nightmare. So yeah, no, you'll see that. So I was interested in that, because I find that the general community thinks oh, we won, but no one can buy the game in those regions. So I don't think it's actually over, and I'm waiting to see what happens here. And in your time doing this as a publisher, have you ever seen anyone want to restrict the game sales of a game for any potential reason in any region?
No, I haven't seen it. It's I've not encountered issues like this, so I haven't seen it. It's but I mean, we've only been it seems like it's a unique circumstance.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I just haven't seen it. It's our games are definitely available everywhere. And then hopefully these will be available everywhere too soon. Yeah, no, I super agree with that, because I've never seen that either. Never seen that in any case. And it looks like the only ones that you guys have blocked in is, there's not much you can do about it. It's going to be sanctioned stuff. Oh, yeah.
Or specific version regions. Yeah. Specific version stuff.
Yeah, anything that happens, if there are, those might be, so here's the thing. If you look at our games, you might find, so what we do is, because we also sell the game in key stores. So there are packages for Against the Storm that are specifically for key stores. So those ones that are region based that you're looking at, I'm not 100% sure, as I haven't been looking at this myself, but I would bet those might be the region locked ones. So that's for instance, we've got a region locked one for just the, sort of the countries with the lowest GDP to give them a really low price and such. And so you might find that might be why you're seeing some that are locked, is just that's not the game on Steam, but because those are saying build type CD key, right?
Yeah, so this one right here is actually the one that has the store page, so they'll actually list that. So this is the one you guys haven't normally, and there's no restrictions. It just does cross-region trading restriction, and gifting is disabled for this item. Pretty normal stuff. We see that quite a lot. It cuts down on cross-region piracy, which is you'll reach out to a service, that service will buy it at a super cheaper amount, and then they trade it to you at your higher priced region. We see that kind of fraud on Steam constantly. So this makes sense to do. Yeah, and that's the same reason we have those other packages, the CDs locked to the region, is just so that people in that region who need it can get the lower priced key, but it doesn't end up going everywhere. We had
there were like Manor Lords is an interesting one because there were so many key stores that don't deal with us and that we're not involved with that were trying to sell pre-orders to Manor Lords, and they didn't have any keys from us. They weren't going to get any keys from us, and we were specifically not doing pre-orders on Manor Lords, and so we didn't want them to get we didn't want them to like basically scam customers because we were worried they would there's no reliability in them, right? And so we put out a lot of statements about how they weren't going to get it. And actually, there's some of them actually shut down. We actually got some of the sort of gray market scam key resellers to pull their listings on Manor Lords based on that. But you can never completely stop it.
Actually, it's quite funny. I constantly was getting requests from streamers for the keys that weren't actually the streamers. They were just kind of fake accounts. They were off by one emails, that kind of stuff all the time. And I started doing something quite funny with that. Was I would give them the key, and then about 12 hours later, I would burn the key using Steam's burn the key tool. So they'd go put it up for sale, and then someone would buy it, and then the key wouldn't work, and they'd leave the seller a negative review, and then suddenly I stopped getting requests for keys. I don't know why that happened. It's quite good. I got on some kind of a blacklist, right? It was great. But no, I always love just causing friction for those guys because they're just out there impersonating streamers and doing all kinds of dumb bullshit. So, it's a great deal of fun for me. 100%.
Yeah, the thing that really got me on the Manor Lords one is some of them were trying to sell it for more than it would be at release.
Yep.
And that really made me angry because I was worried some people would fall for it because we had that 25% discount at release so that everyone could get it for like $29.99 US dollars or or the regional pricing equivalent. And so I saw some listings go up that were trying to sell pre-orders at like the undiscounted price, and that really made me upset because it's like essentially they were trying to scam people out of the discount. So yeah, it was annoying, but I'm glad we're through it and we made it through there. And I think there were not too many people, hopefully, who ended up, falling for any of those pre-orders.
So I've got enough data from like 2 of our games out where I find that piracy generally doesn't really affect our bottom line because we try to mitigate that very, very well with making the game affordable. How do you guys have a measure for how much piracy is impacting you? Is that something that is an actual threat that you worry about in any possible way? Or is it something you feel like you've mitigated?
Honestly, we just don't mind. It's like you said, when you said earlier that piracy is primarily an economic, issue. And, we try to offer, the games to be affordable in the other regions, but if there's someone who still can't afford in their region and some guy really loves it and he goes out and he just he can't he's making choices between staying financially stable and affording his rent or buying the game and he ends up downloading it, I'm not going to be mad at him. He's doing what he does, and it's and I think you drive yourself crazy if you start trying to attack this and you do things that hurt legitimate customers, like start integrating all of these anti-piracy DRM programs, and those things aren't cheap and they mess with things and they absorb development time that could be spent making the game better, and you're just fighting this never-ending war with pirates that you're going to lose anyway. So if people love the game, then I hope they buy it, and I don't really concern myself at all otherwise.
Yeah, the only anti-piracy detection that I have was built in-house, and what it does is it directs them to tweet at me with this bug to get it fixed. And it shows a pirate on screen that's dancing, and then it plays this piracy music, which is quite funny. And the reason I ended up doing that wasn't to clown on them. It's because most of the pirates I found were young children. So they contact me, and they go, they contact me, and they go, hey, why did this bug happen? I go, where'd you get your copy of the game? And they're like, I got it from the site, or I got it from my friend. I'm like, you've got a pirated copy of the game. And I say, let's go walk through scanning your computer for malware. And I'll teach them how to, because dude, we were dumb with LimeWire once, we were kids, they were idiots, they were torrenting crap. And so I'll sit them down and I'm like, here's how you turn on Windows Defender. Here's how you run Malwarebytes. We'll go clean all the malware off the computer. At the end of it, I just hand him a key. Because that kid didn't know any better. And now he understands a little bit more about online security. And that's great. And awesome. The key costs me nothing. So who gives a shit? He wasn't going to be able to buy it anyway. That's why he pirated it. So teach the kid a little bit about security, move on, and have a better day, right? And it's
that's awesome. That's really awesome.
I think I've done that maybe 500 or 600 times now. I think over the life of the game, it's probably about 500 or 600 times because it happens so often, and it's always kids. I think the funniest one that I've seen so far, though, this guy tripled down on it. He messaged me and he was like, he was like, oh yeah, no, I don't know what this bug is. And I was like, where'd you get your copy of the game? And they're like, oh, I bought it from Steam. And I was like, dude, your screenshot shows that it's running out of a folder that's named from the piracy site. You got it. I was like, what do you, come on, man. And he goes, oh, and I thought I got it from a legit website. Thank you. And then he just disappeared. It's like, what's the matter with you?
Yeah.
It's just so dumb. It's so dumb. Yeah. I love that stuff, man.
That's really awesome.
Yeah, no, because I think it has a better effect. Because, like, there's no reason to punish some kid for doing it. And it's also even worse, too, because our studio's name is Pirate Software. So, like, the moment it happens, you're like, I got malware from Pirate Software. It's like, God damn it, I got to go explain it on social media again. No, it wasn't us. No one believes you because the name. It's quite funny. Okay, let's see. What's something you want to see in game dev, like in a game or in a developer? Some kind of behavior or something that you want to see in the game in terms of uniqueness or whatever it's going to be that makes you more interested in publishing that game?
So something unique in the game or the developer. I think that, the game, so I think the developer part's easier to answer because the game part we've already talked about.
Mm-hmm.
That unique thing to love about it. I think with the developer, one thing that's really, really important is that, and I'm trying to figure out how to say this without sounding like pompous, but like their relationship with their game isn't just about money. There's things that sometimes you talk to a developer and they're great, but they'll say things like, well, and then I'll support it after release if it makes enough financial success. And I get it. And this is why I don't want to sound pompous. And I feel bad saying this because of course that's always true. It has to be financially successful enough to, no one can work for free. Right. And that's our job as publisher to make sure it's financially successful enough that they can support it. But at the same time, if the stress is really on that and they start talking about like how, or I'll move on to another project if that seems the best financial choice, then, you don't want the relationship of the game to be entirely about like return on investment on their side either, because it's not for us. Instead you get developers who like, you can tell, like, of course they need to have financial, that's obvious. And that's why we need to do a good job marketing. That's why we need contractual structures to support it. But their relationship with their game should be beyond the financial. They should be caring about the game deeply as itself, wanting it to be better, wanting to be better for players, wanting to make decisions without regard, to like trying to figure out what's the most money they can possibly get. And so that I think works really well for us because fundamentally we're not going to be, Mana Lords is a great example, right? Shortly before release, the developer put out a post, which is part of a long campaign to make sure people were educated what the game was, so they didn't buy it for the wrong reasons, but put out a post, where he talked about the games, that's not a total war killer and it's not this and that. And he put out that post. And then a couple of days later, I put out the release post where I basically told people, don't feel pressured to buy it. We're going to, don't feel pressured by the discount. We're going to run these discounts often. You can wait to buy it. You'll have plenty of opportunities. This is early access. It's not for everyone. Don't feel any rush. Just, you'll have plenty of opportunities to buy it. This discount will keep coming back. And the developer was really happy that I put that out, right? Because he doesn't want people to feel a rush to buy it. He doesn't want people to feel pressured. And because we fundamentally agree, we have aligned values in this way about that. We're not just about trying to drive sales as high as possible. We want people to have a good experience. And so it just works perfectly. The stuff he says, the stuff I say, it's the stuff we would both want said. And that kind of alignment for us works best when things aren't just. So if a developer is there could be a developer who's too commercially focused to really be a good fit for us, because the developer who might get mad at me telling, don't worry, there'll be more discounts later. You shouldn't feel any phone, just wait until it's right for you. I could see a developer legitimately getting upset at me if I said that, because they'd say, well, why? I'm trying to get people to buy my game. Why would I say such a thing? And that wouldn't be a good fit for us.
And they don't get it. Yeah. No. Have you ever played Dwarf Fortress?
Yeah. I will admit I wasn't very good, and I spent about 80% of my time creating worlds and reading their backstory because I found that part so fascinating. So I spent about 30 or 40 hours just creating worlds and reading their backstory and investigating. So,
dude, I feel that. I honestly feel that. I guess the basic way that it looks like to me is, I don't know how far into town building you got or fortress building you got. Did you ever have a dwarf go into a strange mood? You ever have one of those where he like seals himself up in a room and you have to feed him a bunch of
masterwork, right?
Yeah, it creates a masterwork. It feels to me like that same kind of a relationship is here. Is all that it is you have this person that's like, I am compelled to build this thing. And you're like, okay, I'm gonna feed you all the materials to make that thing, and then we're both gonna win out of that. And that seems like a better relationship than like, I need to make this thing to sell it. And I get that 100%. It's more like I'm building something that I think is a masterwork. I'm building something that I think is really cool. I need marble, exactly. I need elven ears, right? I need that to make the video game. It's important, chat. Yeah, we need that. But no, it's true though. Is if you have somebody that's only focused on the wealth, only focused on the sales for that, it could cause friction with the way that you're running a publishing house. And to be real with you, I think the way that you're running it is the better way. I really do, because I find that it works much better when it's cooperative than it does when it is a predatory thing from the publisher, and that the developer is always constantly trying to reach a goal set by the publisher before they're allowed to make money, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed.
Yeah, no, this is good. I think you guys are doing it completely right, which is cool because there's, to be real with you, like you said, 90%, there's so few publishers that do. There are so few. It's one of the ways to describe it to my community a lot of times is, unless the publisher can find a way to give you benefit above and beyond what their costs are, then it doesn't really make sense to work with the publisher. And if you have these types of arrangements like this where it makes sense, where it's always going to be positive in the outcome because you're working together for mutual benefit, that's a better deal. That's always going to be a more positive deal than anybody that comes up to you that's like, I'm going to make you rich. Like, number one, they can't promise you that. And number two, it's probably bullshit, to be real. Let's see. Are there milestones that you find to marketing? And how does one verify the effectiveness of a publisher doing marketing for a studio? So how does a developer know from you that the marketing was effective in any way? And what kind of milestones do you set for that marketing based on the development of the game?
Yeah, that's interesting. Just because the word milestones comes up, I would say that we don't use any milestones in development. So milestones are used by main publishing contracts to require, like, in order to continue to get funding, they meet certain. We don't have milestones because we find that development is so ever changing that they become just like quickly a way of just like, well, I don't like contractual terms that will basically always be violated and thus put someone at the mercy of someone else. And frankly, milestones do that because things change too much. So in terms of marketing, marketing sort of like milestones within the marketing side of things. I think that basically major moments for a game are the initial announcement. That's a big moment, right? And when we're there to announce the new game, so we're a publisher even before it's been announced, then we try to make that as big a deal as possible. And that's the first major marketing event. The next one is probably the first press and influencer preview. And sometimes that happens at the time of Next Fest, and sometimes it doesn't. It depends on the game. So Next Fest might be a separate one or might be the same one. And then the final one is, of course, the review round right before release of press and influencer promotion. And in between there, I think there's this constant background marketing, and that's basically defined by making sure that the game's Steam page reflects as accurately as possible a presentation of what the game is. So when we're thinking about marketing, we think in terms of this. It's basically like, okay, these are the major events, the major bursts, and then these are the sort of like ongoing time in between. And if you take something like Mana Lords might be an example. So Mana Lords got about 3.25 million wish lists before release. And of those, it basically breaks down like this. About 500,000 of them came from the initial press and influencer outreach combined with Next Fest that happened in late October. And then about 800,000 of them came from the press and influencer review round right before release. And so that's about a combined 1.3 million. So basically then the other 2 million came in the in-between times. And that doesn't mean they weren't influenced by that, because those videos stuck around. People continued to discover like influencers played the game in the demos and stuff. But a lot of it was just sort of like it being there, people talking about it, people talking anticipation. influencers making videos talking about what they saw in the game, but it was that in between sort of time. So that's probably not too far from. I mean, obviously, that's much greater magnitude than a normal game, but that distribution that I just described is probably pretty accurate in proportions. Like that's how they often look in terms of the wish list gain. It's so you'll end up having most of it being in between times. The sort of like just it's there to be discovered. People are talking about it, and you present the game well. So yeah, so that's how I'd say it breaks down. Now, in terms of like what's expected at different times, I think that most for most games, things start to wake up around the time of the first influencer and press preview. That's usually something that you do when the game, like you've got the announcement and you've got the reveal there and you've got what the game showed, and that's always good. But around the time of the first influencer and press preview is when you can really start showing the essential, incredibly cool stuff the game has, right? Like you can really
you've got these systems that are starting to get fully fleshed out at that point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The mods were fed
and
$5.
especially if you don't use because we don't do CGI trailers or anything like constructed or fake, right? Everything is always our marketing is just from the game. So that's really when you have the cool stuff to show. So what you'll see is like that background constant gain will be much higher after the first press and influencer preview, because that's also the time when you're able to show the best things, and it also enters more general awareness.
Yeah, no, that makes absolute sense. So, like, I'm actually kind of wondering, because a lot of the things that you've described so far is if the agreement goes perfectly well, knowing full well there's probably been some hiccups along the way, but you've managed them, right? You've managed them out because you guys have worked on it. We talked before about what happens if a developer abandons a game. What happens if a developer's just taking a great deal of time and you're not seeing the kind of results that you would expect, where you're starting to worry, is the project going in the right direction? How do you handle that in a hypothetical scenario like that?
Yeah, I mean, well, the first thing I'll say is a lot of our games have needed extra time, but it's never been because the developer is not trying to do everything they can. We've had some game. We've had we've had some game where it was really just there were serious health issues that came up, and the game had to be delayed because of that. And that's the time when just the important thing is to stress the developer, like, don't stress about this. Take care of take care of these health things. Don't work too much. Don't worry about it. People are going to complain, but that's okay. Just focus on the important thing and return to development when and as you're ready. There's been other times where developers, where it's been slower than they hoped, or maybe there was some amount of going down, the wrong path, or something didn't, I mean, everything is like a series of like choices, and nothing is ever perfectly efficient, right? So some things take longer than expected. Maybe there's critical staff lost at one point, and that slows things down. And there, I think the best thing that a publisher can do is to be patient and, to be perfectly frank, to be there to offer financial support to cover the delay and to make sure the developer's okay. And this will distribute across a spectrum. I mean, we've got games that have delayed multiple years at this point, and the developer's still working, and they're still working towards a great game. And as long as they're still working and they're still trying, our best job is to be understanding, to continue to give them the time, to not rush them, and to provide them the support they need.
If you're seeing a developer that's simply burnt out and it's not one of those kind of extreme situations, would you handle that the same way?
I mean, I think I would encourage them to take some time and rest a bit and recover. The truth is, it's not. I mean, there's no set dates the way we. I mean, this is the event. This is why we will never be a public company. We're never going to be subject. We're never going to. We're entirely privately owned, I should say, by individuals and people who love games. So every shareholder is an individual, and an individual loves games. And no one, there are no quarterly reports. There just aren't. No one's looking at these things. So it's never that important to rush anything, because no one's really thinking about that. No one's rushing anything. We all believe that games should have the time they need. We're all not even fundamentally focused on, the profit numbers. So in the end, there's just no rush. Developers need more time. They need more time. It could be that there's some time in the future where there is a project that cannot be completed, and then we'll deal with it as we can, but it hasn't come up yet. And it's and I think we're going to do everything we can to make sure we support the developers to reduce the chance of that.
Honestly, it's kind of funny to say. I've talked to a ton of publishers, man. I've talked to a ton of publishers, dozens and dozens of them over the years. You guys are doing this exactly right. You're doing it exactly right out of everything that I've heard. This is good. And there's a few other publishers that are starting up, ones that are just kind of entering the industry now, that I think are doing it similarly to what you're doing. And I think this conversation will largely help many of those other kind of fledgling publishers that are just starting out, because I think this is a better way to run this. And while you guys have your focus on specific kinds of games, I want more in the industry to operate this way, because I think overall we'll get better games and we'll get better conditions for developers if more publishers acted this way, frankly.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I very much want that too. I mean, we're doing certain genres. There's so much for I really want this to be, exactly as you said.
The standard. Yeah, the standard. And it's funny because for every one that we see like this, there's 100 other publishers that are like, let's take all their money. It's just like, dude, stop it. You're just killing games. You're just killing them off. Like, it's really sad to watch, frankly. And it's even from studios that just knock it out of the park and they still just get shut down or anything like that. Actually, in terms of that, I'm very interested. How do you guys handle rights to the games? Because a lot of the times you'll see full ownership by the publisher, or you'll see partial ownership by the publisher. I know you can't discuss individual contracts, but how do you approach this discussion?
Oh, do you mean like IP rights? The developer always owns that. We never take that.
No IP rights whatsoever, nothing to source code, nothing to imagery, nothing like that, just for distribution, correct?
Yeah, we operate under an exclusive license to market and distribute the game. But the developer owns all of the IP.
So in situations like that, how do you handle localization if you don't have the rights to distributing or sub-licensing anything from like the text of the game? Is that something that the developer would be implementing and you'd have the developer hook up with the the localization team, or are you managing that?
So the exclusive license includes anything that we need to conduct these kind of publishing operations and provide this support. So basically we have the exclusive license to market, distribute, publish. Basically it covers the things we need to do as a publisher, because neither us or the developer would want there to be any like roadblocks or legalistic hurdles or anything. So and by the same token, when we pay the localizer, the developers have the localization, right? Like there's no like issue where like, like we all have the rights that we need to do the things that we do. There's otherwise, you involve lawyers and things. Speaking as a former lawyer, involving lawyers and things would just slow everything down. So
yeah, it does. The nightmare of more lawyers. Yes.
Yeah.
No, that's great, dude. That's honest. And then all of chat is just posting a bunch of W's, by the way. They deeply approve of your position on this. So hell yeah. And quote, we need more publishers like Hooded Horse. There we go. Yes, good.
That's really nice. Thank you. I've enjoyed this interview a lot.
I'm really glad. I have too. It's always nice because publisher, kind of like the term publisher in our industry, comes with kind of a bad name, frankly. Like it comes with like publisher. I don't know about that, right? Because as you said, there are so many of them that have the wrong idea about it and more parasitic in nature. So when you meet somebody who's running a publishing house, because you're CEO of Hooded Horse, that is doing it the right way, it's just so refreshing, man. Like it really is. It's incredibly refreshing.
Thank you. That's really nice of you to say.
Yeah. And I mean it too. Like, because I would eviscerate you otherwise. I am not.
Well, that would be fun too.
Yeah. I don't hold back on that kind of stuff, man. Like,
good.
So let's see here. Let me see if there's any other questions from chat here. So let's say a game is like fully released out there and you guys kind of have it just out there and there's not much else to do. Do you still do more marketing activities? Do you still push it out there? What does it look like from we did our initial push, the game did really well, we've got it out there with the community. How do you manage the game from there until sunset, which is the game just kind of, fades away into history, or it has kind of like a small community that keeps playing it for a very long period of time?
Yeah, I mean, we believe very much that games, like I'm someone who plays games from 30 years ago and enjoys doing it. And I believe that games strategy games, especially because they're not fundamentally reliant on graphics, but just in generally, I think that games have, like, if they have something unique in what they offer, what we look for, they can live for 20, 30 years, even beyond that. So there's, we continue to do everything we can to promote the games. And we've got, in fact, I mean, some of the ones I mentioned, like that sign on with us, like Workers and Resources, Empires of the Undergrowth, those games have been already out in EA for 5 or 7 years, and there's still stuff to do because the developers are working out. There's stuff to show people. There's new people discovering the games all the time. I think it does not stop at all on release. I think, like these are games that will live for decades.
Yeah, no, I super agree with that. I think that's generally the right stance on it too, because there's sort of this odd thing that I see a lot of the times. They're like, oh, dead game. Why? Because it's lost 50% of its player base? Who cares, right? Like it's always really, especially on single player games. I see that happen quite a lot where you'll see like a single player game is dropped off by like 80% a couple months later. And it's like, yeah, because they beat it, right? Like they beat the game. They don't need to play it anymore. And there's still that core kind of a community that wants to play that and wants to engage with it. And it's good to hear that it just stays supported going in that kind of a direction. That's good.
Yeah.
Let's see. So what does a general contract look like when you're talking to developers? What do you bring to the devs and what do the devs bring to the publisher? I think in that case, it's going to be very specific, right? Very, very specific based on the kind of needs that they require, right?
Well, I mean, honestly, I would say in general, the ways we contribute value are true across games. Like we're always going to, like the marketing side of things, right? Like there's unique, well, I mean, you mentioned the helmet earlier, right? Which is a unique part of the Manalords marketing campaign, but it's the same sort of thing that we would want to do, something to, to promote the game. So I'd say marketing is pretty, there it is.
Yeah. It's freaking rad.
Yeah, I tell you, one of our Anthony, who helped arrange this interview on our team. I think we hopefully his wife was very understanding about the portion of his house that was filled with helmets for like a month. So we owe her deep thanks, and we owe him deep thanks for having.
That's very funny. That's very funny. Honestly, this was totally unexpected, and I think it's rad as hell. It's honestly amazing, dude. Like sending something out like this is just so freaking cool. What an awesome piece.
That was Anthony's idea.
Really?
Anthony's amazing. He's just, he came up with the idea, and he's the one who packaged all the boxes together and put it all together. I mean, he did amazing stuff. I really like our team. Like I'll try to avoid going through gushing about all our team members and how much they are amazing, because then this would, my very understanding person with the next meeting would like, I would really stretch his patience if I spent the next 30 minutes doing that. But okay, so on to the question, the rest of it. So I think marketing, it's sort of the same basic thing we're trying to achieve. When it comes to, when it comes to strategic partnerships and such, like it's setting them up, we look at the same range of things. Honestly, there's a lot that is just, we do everything we can to market, to distribute the game, to work with stores, to form partnerships, to get it out there. It's always unique how that proceeds, but the basic need and the basic thing that the publisher provides there is more places for people to see the game and more ways for people to discover, hey, this is a game that I would love. And that does stay the same. So I think, it ends up being pretty standard in that sense. I'm also trying to be very transparent with people about how we calculate things, like, what our terms look like. And because I want to be fair in that way. So I think it ends up being, it ends up being sort of standard. Now there is every time we do a deal, a developer has unique concerns, like something they want in the contract. Usually some way they don't want to be screwed, to be perfectly honest. Like they've heard about someone getting screwed in this way and that way. And usually our contract actually is already protective of that, but they want an extra assurance, like a specific clause saying this will not happen. And so usually every developer has a couple of things they want added that are basically of the sense of this will not happen. It's something that they want guaranteed because they specifically want to just make absolutely sure it doesn't happen to them. And then it's no problem to add it because it's never something that would happen. We do. So we always allow developers to, like, it's never a take it or leave it kind of contract. It's like, hey, if you're concerned about anything, let's add something to make sure you don't need to be concerned.
No, I mean, that makes complete sense. Everybody's always worried about getting ripped off like everybody else that they've seen, by a bad publisher or whatever it's going to be. So, like, I get that. I 100% get that, of having those types of fears. I do have to say, I love wearing this helmet, but I also wear headphones. However, I've realized that when you wear the headphones like this, the voice actually resonates through the helmet, and it's like you're standing inside of a speaker.
Oh, wow.
It's actually amazing. It's completely amazing. It's just one big speaker. So the last question that we have is, if you were to publish a game that had live service features, such as server hosting, things like that, how would you handle that game if it reached end of life, where it is no longer able to be supported financially, where it's something that you don't feel should still be on the market because the cost of those servers is just too high?
I mean, the thing is, I love game preservation. I love old games so much that I feel like as long as it was affordable, I'd keep it even after it was losing money, because it's just, I mean, as long as I was making, as long as we were able to do that, and it wasn't that much, if it wasn't that much compared to the total amount that we're making. So it's not impacting our ability to make sure that we can, take care of our, the people who work for us, and, give them good treatment, and have nice, a sustainable company, and offer developers the delay funding they need. If all of that is secure and is not in danger, then I would probably keep it going. I would probably analyze it not against, like, oh, well, right now it's not making me additional money to have it going. I'd probably ask, well, how much did that player base originally make us, right? Because that's the thing, is like, if in the first, like, X years of its life, it, did, like, the players put in, they paid for it and they did well, I think they deserve to have it continue to be support and available if at all possible. Rather than just analyzing, like, oh, well, going forward, I mean, like, that's the thing, is it's kind of like, it's losing a sense of gratitude to what they helped build and what they gave you in the past. And so as long as it wasn't, like, significant and cost towards the total amount the company was making, we just keep it going.
That's good. I like that. Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that people are wondering is, if you couldn't, in the extreme circumstance that you couldn't, would you ever have a situation like that where you would want to release that into the public so that they can continue on with it?
But I mean, definitely. It's, personally, I've gone and played Ultima Online on, like, fan servers that continue to exist. I played Ultima Online as a kid, and, I wanted to show it actually to my wife. So the two of us went and we joined a fan server and played it. And, I think that's wonderful. Yeah, absolutely. Give it to the community. And I don't think it's either or, you can do both. Like, let the community host the servers is wonderful, and should be something that's done regardless, I think.
Yeah. Hell yeah. One of us. That's great, man. That's really good. You're awesome as hell, and gives me a great deal of respect for your studio and for what you are doing, for your publishing house. It's fantastic. It's really good to hear that there are publishers out there that operate in this manner. So this has been a fantastic talk, and I'm really happy to have had you on. Thank you for the opportunity for this, man.
No, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I guess you'll be going, as you explained earlier on. So I wish you a good stream, and thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you. And tell your buddy hello.
Will do. All right. Bye.
I'll see you later. That was fantastic. I'm really impressed. It's always hit or miss talking to a publisher, and he kicked complete ass. Like 100%. Yeah. Really, really awesome. And I love what they're doing, man. I absolutely love what they're doing. Phenomenal, frankly. It's just all the right direction for that kind of stuff, and the most measured and proper response to those types of scenarios, right? And I tried to throw him some real rough ones, and he took it in stride. That's good. Yeah. Really good. Really, really good.